I had a friend say to me once, I wanted to help you, but you wouldn't tell me what you needed. And she was one of my closest friends. And I thought, did I assume she knew what I needed? Or was I too embarrassed to ask her? I don't know. But I wish, I've thought about that. Like, I would have had an ally if I just would have said, here's what I need.
On this episode, we're talking with a special needs mom. And because of that, I invited our friend, Emmy Ort. You got to hear her last month tell a bit of her own story, but I wanted her to participate as a guest host. Welcome, Emmy.
Thank you. I am so excited for us to talk to Amy. She has ministered to my own soul as a mom. And I'm excited for our guest to meet her and hang with my silver sister.
I can barely contain my jubilation. I get to introduce you all to a friend of mine, Miss Amy J. Brown, and we're going to get right into it. Can you tell us what's your connection to the foster and adoptive space?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's a privilege to be here. I'm Amy J. Brown, as you said, and I am mom to 6. My husband and I had 3 biological children and then felt the Lord calling us to adopt. So we ended up have 3 adopted children. We have 2 children that are domestically adopted and 1 that is from internationally adopted. And some of our kids have physical disabilities. Some of them have mental health, invisible disabilities. So we've been parenting. Well, our oldest is 32 for 32 years, and we're finally empty nesters this year. So for right now.
Right. No guarantees on that. No guarantees.
Yes.
Absolutely. And you mentioned something right out of the gate that I was planning to ask you about. You used this term, invisible disabilities. Can you tell us more? What does that mean? Yeah.
Well, an invisible disability is one that can't be seen with the physical eye. And we have a child who we adopted from Bulgaria, and he has physical issues. He's obviously, when you look at him, you can tell his physical disabilities. He also has some attachment disorder and other things you can't see. And then we have a daughter who looks typical physically, but she has fetal alcohol syndrome. She's exposed to drugs. When her mom was pregnant, she has attachment disorder. So the difference in how people approach my 2 children was night and day. My son, who still had challenging behavior, people gave him a lot of grace, and my daughter, not so much. So that is the term I use when I work with women is people don't see it, so they don't understand it. And there's a lot of judgment, and it's a really lonely place to be. So that's pretty much the definition of it.
Yeah, I do know about that personally, and that the compassion isn't always just right at the forefront because they can't see it with their eyes. And I know I've heard a professional in our space say, he'd considered keeping a picture of the MRI of 2 different brains in his back pocket to show people because it really can be difficult. Thank you for that explanation. I really appreciate it.
So, Amy, if you could pull back the curtain at the Brown house, say like a decade ago, and kind of let us see you were in the thick of it. Tell us about what it was like and how you saw God show up and just how you and your husband were able to recognize his nearness in the thick of the hard.
Well, my first immediate answer was, do I have to? No, I'm kidding. It was pretty intense. So I will take you back 10 to 15 years ago. We had all 6 kids at home. Our son and our daughter that have pretty severe attachment disorder had very challenging behavior. I'm talking, we had to have alarms. We had to hide all the sharp objects. We had elopement. We had all kinds of things. And if I look back, I could probably paint you a picture of what it looked like in my house day to day, but I want to talk about what it looked like in me because I want the moms and parents that are listening to understand that in the midst of all that overwhelm, I was feeling like I'm not doing this right. I'm failing. Where is God? All the things. I just felt like I just needed the right answer to make everything okay, which was kind of naive of me. But in that time when you said, where did God show up? I remember somebody said to me, there were times I felt like he didn't, if I'm being honest. And there was a lady that said to me, I just can't wait to see what God's going to do. And I put on my good little smiley face and went, yeah. And then I went home and cried and said, God, what are you doing? Like, what is going on here? And God led me on this journey to see that he was with me in the hard. In the Bible, there's a story about, Abraham and Sarah and Hagar, when she is kind of being treated not kindly by Sarah. She runs out into the desert and God comes to her and comforts her. And she says in that moment, he is a God who sees me. But he didn't make it all better. He sent her back. And when I realized that it's not the outcome of solving everything, but it's being seen, that kind of made the difference in everything. Not that I've made it easy right away. It's just like, okay, I'm being seen. God is here in this hard. And I think I naively thought if I just did all the right things, it was going to be okay. He's going to fix it. But it was okay because I learned to lean on him. And I'm still learning to lean on him because now I have adult kids and that's a whole nother thing. But just knowing, he sees me. And so if I know that he sees me, and if the people listening know that he sees them, you can get up and go, okay, what's the next thing? And that was such a mindset shift and a soul shift for me.
Yeah, that's so good. And I think, like when I picture Hagar under that tree, she's so alone. And I think, honestly, when we're parenting kids with complex needs, whether they're visible or invisible, we can tend to sometimes isolate ourselves under a tree like that. But yeah, it can be like grief-filled and so isolating. And could you talk a little bit with us about just that gap, the loss of maybe dreams and expectations, the grief, and then how you took steps towards connection and accepting those things?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And, if I want to start with the grief part, sometimes grief, we think it's just crying or sadness, but it looks like a lot of different things. So I think the first step in the grief is to recognize it. It could look like anger, a lot of things. But it looks like for me what I call my overs. I just get over busy and overthinking and oversolving. And that's me avoiding the grief and recognizing it and being able to name it. And also being able to say, we can grieve for our kids. Like, I wish my children did not have the trauma they had. But we forget to grieve for ourselves. And you name something that here we are in what our reality is. And here we are in what we wish it would have been or hoped it could be. And in the middle is this space. And I often think of that space as the space where hope and joy can be held. But first we have to unclench our fist, which is really hard. And sometimes I have to force a finger at a time apart to open my hands and say, in the middle of what is and what I hope it to be is space for joy and hope. And each day, finding ways to put those gaps together a little bit better with open hands. A couple practices, if I can share those that have been really helpful for me. Number one is the practice of lament, which I didn't really know what that was for the longest time. It's the practice, if you read in the Psalms, some of the Psalms are intense. They say really intense things that you don't think a good Christian girl would say, but it's complaining, bringing it to God. Like, why? Why is it this way? Because God can handle that. Please fix it, the petition. And then the next step is a resolution, but I don't want it to sound like resolution like it's all better now, but realizing the truth that I'm seen by God, or he's a God who sees me, and giving those really intense feelings to God, I think it's the first step in unclenching our fist. And then I would say another thing that really helped me was in the midst of the hard and challenging circumstances, it's hard to see any good, honestly, because everything seems terrible in a 5-alarm fire all the time, or so that seems in our perception. So one of the things that I sometimes when I work with moms, or what I've done for myself for years, is I call it small moment living. I would write in the margin of my calendar, a note app on my phone. I take a picture of today I went to the store and took one child with me and we had a great conversation, or I took this kid to ice cream, or I had 5 minutes outside to look, and whatever it is, however small it is, you can look back and go, life and love and joy and hope were happening along the way. It's almost like refocuses how you see it, how you see the situation.
I love that, because it's recentering that he's at the center of it all, is what I'm hearing. And it's kind of that eyes on me. And when our eyes are there, we do feel seen by him. You have mentioned, and I know a little more about you than we've shared so far too, just through reading your book and different things that you've done. You mentioned suffering and that there's grief in the suffering. And, God doesn't always change our suffering. Sometimes that suffering just continues on. As you reflect on it, do you feel like God was indifferent to your suffering in that season? Or explain to me how that works for you.
Well, to be honest, there were times, because you don't accidentally go into foster care or foster parenting or adoption. You feel called and you choose it. So there's that piece of me that was like, you called me to this. And then this is what we got. Which I think we have this idea that if we do God's calling, it's all going to be sunshine and roses. And we know that's not how it is, but we kind of wish it was. So one of the things that I had to come to terms with is, I think about this journey like a path. And one of my favorite Psalms is Psalm 23. And I think I was on the path looking for the destination. When we get over here, it's all going to be okay. Forgetting the companion. And it's all about the companion, who is Christ. And the way that Psalm 23 talks about, he walks beside us. He brings me rest. He prepares a table in front of my enemies. Meditating on that and realizing, it's not about me having it all together. It's not about my kids having it all together. It's not about a Sunday where somebody doesn't have to leave service or, name it, all the things. It's about me being aware of the moment and the person walking with me, who is God. And the scripture is full of places where it says God is close to the brokenhearted. But I think in that brokenheartedness and grief and suffering, we're so isolated. And once again, like you said, we look in, we contract instead of expand, and we forget. I think not only do we forget that there are other people that can come alongside us, we forget God's coming alongside us because we're so inward focused. And that isolation, and nobody has it as bad as me, and nobody understands, all those things are all the narratives in our head. So to look outward again, for me, I had to keep saying, okay, he's walking with me. He's more grieved by this trauma that my children experience than I am. He's more grieved about my hurt than I am. And just continually, and I don't want to sound like, I just did that once and then I, was totally fine. No, it was a constant struggle to work that out with fear and trembling, as they say, constantly working it out that, okay, God is in this and he's the companion. And that's the focus. And almost when you think about hiking, if you are just like one step in front of the person in front of you, is kind of sometimes how I had to walk that path. I wish God would have said, okay, in 3 years, it's all going to be okay. Just buckle down. But that's not how that works. So that was very helpful for me to look at that. Once again, he sees me and he's walking with me in those moments.
Yeah, that he's there.
Amy, once I remember you and I having a conversation about Psalm 23, and something that stood out in that conversation was when you referred to him setting a table, and we talked about that he was capable of doing that in the chaos. And that's what a lot of us face, is it feels like a lot of chaos. And then you helped me look at the enemy is not my children, but the enemy is the trauma that happened to them. Would you just share with our listeners a little bit about your perspective on the Psalms? We want to hear more.
Well, as we talk about our kids, especially our kids with challenging behaviors, and especially kids with attachment disorder that are coming at you and yelling at you and all the things, it's easy to think that they're the the enemy. And what you said is it's the trauma. And the reason I love the visualness of the psalm is that it's so abundant. He sets a table in the midst of our trauma and our not sleeping and our up at night and our hard conversations with the principal, which happen all the time, and the doctors that don't understand. He's not just like throwing us a little sustenance. He's setting a table, which means we can rest in the midst of all of that. I think we have this idea, once we get this problem solved, we can rest. But I mean, I've learned to sit at that table in an ER, right? At a psych ward, at a principal's meeting where someone's about to get expelled. And guess what? It's my kid, not the other kid. And all those times, I would think, I'm at the table and God is here and he's not just giving me the drudges. He is equipping me and giving me sustenance. And there's such an abundance to it. And it's not, I mean, you don't get there right away, obviously, but just to keep having that visual image that in the midst of all this, errors flying, accusations, whatever's going on, I am, when you're a guest at a house, it is the best, especially if you're a mom who cooks all the time, just that someone cared enough to know I made this for her. Sit down. You belong here. You are loved. Get your sustenance here, even in the midst of all the chaos. And that's such a paradigm shift from our, like I said, 5-alarm fire, always solving, trying to get ahead of the next. Somebody said to me today, praying for you. I don't know if anything's going on. I said, give us 5 days. Something will be going on. So just keep praying. But, just even in those moments of ease or hard times, that table is there and available. And it's out of love. It's out of love for us. And I think, once again, back to being seen and knowing we're God's beloved can help center us in those spaces that are really challenging.
Yeah, and I heard you tap on it a little bit in your answer there. It can be easy in a really hard season to think that I have it worse than everyone, that no one's ever had it as bad. I mean, we can just when the weight is heavy and crushing, pain makes it hard to look outside of ourselves. Mm-hmm. Like for sure, it consumes a lot of energy, if nothing else. And so something I know about you is part of your journey has been learning to serve others and to help others. Can you speak more to that?
I was thinking about, for a long time, I didn't know anybody that was walking through what I was walking through. And I had taken my son he is pretty profoundly deaf, to a school that had deaf classroom. And the principal, I wanted to ask her about our kid with attachment disorder. And I found out she had a daughter with attachment disorder. And I'd never met this woman. I laid my head down on her desk and wept. She probably thought, okay, like, calm down, honey. But, I think we feel so unseen. And we, like you said, we have these ideas. Nobody has it as hard as me. Nobody will understand it, all those things. And so I think about to younger Amy and think I would have given anything for one person to go, I get it. I get it. So my reaching out to other people is really my need to fill a need I did not have as a younger mom. And when I serve other people, when I work with moms, I just want to create a space where there's no shame, that their stories are heard. And I'm a strong believer that our stories and telling our stories to each other makes us feel seen, makes us feel less lonely. And so it kind of started with that. And I know there are moms out there that feel this guilt, like I should be helping, I should be doing something, but you're doing something when you hear somebody else's story. Doesn't mean you have to, I just think that reaching across, even if you're same age, same circumstances, or I'm older and I've got a younger woman I'm working with, is just a way for connection, not just for the person I'm talking to, but for myself, for us both to be seen. And that has been such an important part of, now that I've got older kids, of my journey, is I don't want anyone to feel like I'm the worst mom. Nobody gets me. It must be my fault. I want them to understand that, like we talked about this sumptuous banquet in the midst of our enemies, hearing somebody's story is part of that. And that's been a super important part of my journey because I just didn't have anybody. I did not have one person that understood what I was going through.
Yeah. And we know that that's part of your connection with the Lord was he saw you when no one else saw you. And the thing I see in you is that comfort he poured into you. You're pouring that comfort onto others. I love that.
So many of our families, you spoke of this a minute ago, just like maybe not getting to church or having to leave early, or church can look a lot different sometimes in these really hard seasons for your family. And what would you kind of say to that family that's wrestling with, like, I know this is a healthy place for community, but how do we stick it out here? Or how do we do this creatively for a season? Or how would you encourage those families?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is that a lot of times church is more stress than it's not because of our kids, and also because of our people not understanding. I mean, we've all been pulled out because your kid is the one in Sunday school, right? If there's not a ministry that can support your children, which makes you more isolated. So my first thing I would say, if there are times you need to take a break, that's okay. I had a mom that I was talking to recently that they decided one Sunday a month they were going to go hike just because they needed a space because church was hard. So I just want to name that that's a reality for a lot of people. Also, sometimes we're kind of asked, we're not very welcome at church, which is unfortunately can be the case. So if you are looking for how to stay connected to church, how to stay connected to others, I think you have to be creative. And sometimes it's one parent goes and another parent stays home. I often tell moms that if it's already stressful, your week's stressful, and then you're having to advocate at church, maybe you need to stay home one week, or there's all kinds of ways you can do it. But I want to encourage people to keep trying. I think and that's with connection with anybody, friends, somebody, kids at school, parents at school, keep trying. I think we have a bad experience and we think, okay, they're not going to get me, right? They're just not going to get it. And I say sometimes, I don't even understand it half the time, and I live it. So to help people like have conversations, tell what you need. And I know that's hard. No, we already feel like we're the train wreck at every event because we have all these things going on. But saying to people, here's what would help me, because I really believe people just don't understand how to help. And one of the ways, if we're talking specifically about church and how to get your family to be more accepted or helped in church, is I often use the analogy of the wheelchair ramp. If we needed a wheelchair ramp for a kid, there's no shame in that. Nobody would question that. And so sometimes I'll encourage families to go to the pastor, go to the children's ministry, say, here's the wheelchair ramp she needs. She needs to have headphones on because she's got sensory processing. She needs to not have the sugary snack. She needs a little bit more time. That kind of wording. I think, as we talked earlier, and Tricia said it, like we just kind of collapse on ourselves and nobody understands. But how can they understand if we don't try to explain it? And we have to keep trying, unfortunately. I wish that was not the case. But don't give up. And that's even with friendships, right? Just keep trying to explain what you need. I have found, for the most part, I had a friend say to me once, I wanted to help you, but you wouldn't tell me what you needed. And she was one of my closest friends. And I thought, oh, did I assume she knew what I needed to, or was I too embarrassed to ask her? I don't know. But I wish, I've thought about that. Like, I would have had an ally if I just would have said, here's what I need. I need nobody to ask me about this child today, or I need to be able to say all the things, or I need to sit in a Sunday service without being worried, all those things. So I don't know if that answers your question.
That did. Yes, that's so good. And you spoke of, and it resonated with me a little because we call it tag team parenting sometimes, that like maybe your husband goes to church and you go the next week, and it's like, well, that one is a little bit isolating as a couple, but
Right.
I know we have done some research and saw that like statistically 84% of parents who are parenting a child with a disability, invisible or physically clear, their marriages fail. So how did you and your husband just really pour into one another in those seasons that were kind of divisive, not necessarily because you didn't get along, but because of circumstance.
Right. Yeah. That's a great question. Before I answer that, though, I want to add one more thing to what I said before. When you are going separately to church, or I always like, a friend of mine always tells me when I say things like, well, we can't go to church together, she says, for now. And those two words are so helpful to frame it. Okay, for now. So I just wanted to add that encouragement. Okay. Well, when you guys sent me questions, I looked at this question. My husband is actually not here right now, but he was around this morning, and I asked him because I wanted to know what he would say. So I have two people's answers. First of all, he said, I'm going to start with his answer. And I'm going to talk specifically about kids that come from trauma and have attachment disorder. He said, once we recognize that the triangulation, in our family, our daughter was very violent to me and would turn on a dime with her dad. Hi, Dad. How you doing? And it was just night and day. And so once we realized the implications of trauma, and that that they are trying to survive, like they're doing something to try to survive, and there's triangulation, and kind of understood that helped both of us take a step back and go, okay, this isn't personal. And so David, and this is not the case with everybody. I have moms who say my husband doesn't believe me because the child is completely different with him. He always believed me because we understood those dynamics. We learned to understand those dynamics and look at them almost clinically in some ways, if that makes sense. Okay, this is triangulation. Okay, she's doing this to me, to Amy, because of her attachment. And David could then look at it a little bit more detached in some ways. The other thing I would say is, now we've known each other since we've been 16, so we've known each other a long time, but we always tried to choose each other first. And we did not do that by weeks away on a cruise. We did that by very small moments of connection. And I think that helped us have undivided front with our kids. We always chose each other first for connection. And I know that's really hard when you have a lot of children, when you have kids that come from trauma or have disabilities of any kind. But we always tried to make an effort. And it wasn't date night always, because we didn't have, it's hard to get a babysitter for somebody who's as severe as our daughter. But it would be sometimes in our room. We had a little couch. We'd sit in there when everybody was watching a video for 15 minutes, or just trying to find little anchors. I call them anchors throughout the day, where we would just try to connect. And the times when someone brave, like my beloved mother-in-law, would come watch the kids for a day, we took advantage of that. There's always times you go, well, we should probably be doing something else. But I'm really grateful that we did that. We've been on the same page a lot of the time. The times we weren't were really hard, but we managed to find our way back to each other. I would also say that when if you're a mom that you're taking the brunt of the behavior, or you're the main caregiver, it's really easy to think I'm the only one affected by this. And so to see each other and talk about, he was not affected or didn't do the daily caregiving like I did, but his pain was seeing my pain, and being able to talk about that a little bit was really helpful for us as we walked through this journey.
Yeah. One last question before we get to where people can find you and find all your resources. Obviously with 6 and with all kinds of needs, life was always busy, right? Mm-hmm, there was not a lot of margin. It's not like, oh, there was spare time to spend time with my husband, or spare time, right? Mm-hmm. You really had to learn how to make time in the midst of a really busy season. And something I know about you is you're really good about finding a place to be still, a place for stillness. Can you just kind of speak, I don't know if you have tips, tricks, or kind of how that evolved. How did you get there? How did you do that? And again, thinking back to that younger Amy, what would you tell her, as she's struggling to figure it out, that might help her get there a little more quickly?
Mm-hmm. I think I would tell young Amy a couple things. First of all, calm down. And second of all, a lot of things are not emergencies, right? And so I think as a young mom, need to get a call from the school, and I would all be, once again, it's going to be an emergency. We have more time. There are true emergencies, obviously, but for the most part, we have more time. Stillness and silence and solitude and just space for yourself is like putting your oxygen mask on first. And that's an overused cliche, but it's so important. And I know all of us, if we were with a kid on a flight, we'd still put their mask on first. We probably would. But learning to breathe and learning to give myself my own space, not just because I would be a more calm presence to my children, but for my own belovedness with God, was a really vital part of how I learned to walk through this. And what I would tell moms, first of all, it's so small. You start with not listening to music while you're in the car line at school. It's deep breathing when you're outside it's really starts small, and you build on it and you build on it. And one of the things when I work with women is I ask them to make a life-draining and life-giving list. And when they make a life-giving list, like I've said this before, that I learned very quickly that being outside is very life-giving to me. I have a client who, she loves to take baths. She figured out, I feel lighter when I do this. So she took something that was already life-giving, and she used that time to be still, and pause. Will find myself, I would go for walks outside, and instead of having earbuds in and listening to something, I would just be quiet and just look about me. And I don't want people to think like a monk in a monastery who's quiet, 24/7 and you're never moving. It can happen in your life in all kinds of ways. If we start to pay attention and notice, here's a little pocket of time. I'm at the grocery. I'm not going to go in right away. I'm going to deep breathe and look at the sky. There's all kinds of ways we can do it. And I could hear people saying, well, what does that really do? Well, it calms us and centers us back to that. If we're going to use the image of the table, back to sitting down at that table. And I really feel like that helped me in the many years of parenting, because even our non-adopted, non-special needs kids, just raising that many kids is a thing. So I think it just was like little sips of grace along the way to get me through each day. And in those moments of stillness, you also recognize joy in life and things to be grateful for. I think we're just going too fast all the time. And for me, that is such a big part of me understanding and hearing God and grounding myself.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of sips of grace. The other thing I kind of hear in there too is in order for us to teach our kids their belovedness, right? Their beloved, we have to model it. We actually have to show them like that I can't give you what I don't have, right? And I can't lead you to a place I haven't been. And so if we don't know our own belovedness, it's going to be hard for us to teach our kids that worth. So it's twofold. It's not even just for us, but it's really for the children in our care as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I love it. I've loved our time here. I wish we just had more and more. I would love to just sit and talk with you. It's been so enjoyable. If folks want to learn more about you, and I know you've got a book, and what's your website? Tell us just a little bit more about what you have to offer and where they can find you.
Thank you. First of all, thanks for having me. This was so fun, and we could talk all day. So, okay. Well, you can find me at amyjbrown.com. That is my website. And some of the things I offer. Well, first of all, I do have a book. It's called The Other Side of Special. It's co-written with 2 other special needs moms. I am the only adoptive mom and the only mom with kids with invisible disabilities. But it just gives you a way to handle the messy emotions. And you hear from each one of us each chapter. So yeah, that's on my website and wherever you find books. I also offer mentoring and spiritual direction. I do have some writing on my website, but I mainly write on Substack, which is, there's a little button website that you can find that. And then I also have a course right now called Overwhelmed to Empowered, and it's finding your strength while navigating invisible disabilities. And I want to say it's not just specifically to behavior, it's how to you and your child, just some tips of things that I have learned along the way to help me navigate the life. It's not a behavior plan. It's more of a, here's the things that help me kind of. And it's with a lot of, it's a pretty short course and there's a lot of extras. So that's on the website too. So.
Thank you, Amy. I know for my own story, I found you in a time where I felt very isolated. And when I would hear your voice on that podcast, I leaned in closer and felt seen and understood and no longer isolated. So I'm grateful you can share that with our families too, so they can feel that joy that I found connecting with you. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
If you were encouraged today to sit down, be still, lean in near to the Lord, share it with a friend. They'll be encouraged as well.